What I'll do, Nigel, is I'll mute you and then
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, everybody. Hopefully you can all see my screen and you're all there. Thank you very much for joining us on this webinar this morning. I'm just going to do a very, very short introduction, and then I'm going to hand over to Nigel from F5. So I'll just run through that now and go from there. So yeah, just going to talk a little bit about ourselves, very, very briefly touch about this webinar and what it's about, and then hand over to Nigel. So for those of you who don't know anything about us, which is probably very few of you out there today, we were purchased by the Bytes Group in August 2011. But have been left as an autonomous and independent business, which means we have the benefit of effectively still being an independent reseller, with the security being backed by a large group, which means we still have the ingenuity, agility and responsiveness that we've always had, but we have the backing of a larger group and all of the benefits therefore, so we can offer purchasing integration around Microsoft and as well as all the security stuff and that kind of thing. Bytes also do a lot of VMware, a lot of Oracle, a lot of Adobe. So, you know, there is some really good opportunities for consolidating purchasing down within the group as a whole. But as I said, you know, we've still been very much left alone. We're still an independent reseller in our own right. And you know, we are very passionate and proud of what we do. I'm very proud of the fact that we've got a technical team that is genuinely technical, that we have no first-line engineers on support, and that we have some very good salespeople with some very good licensing and technical skills as well, who are able to make a real difference to our customers when it comes to, you know, designing, helping design estates and finding cost savings, etc. The group as a whole, 2.3 billion worldwide, which is the Ultron group. The Bytes Technology Group, which is based out of South Africa, it's approximately 700 million. Obviously in the UK, software services is between 150 and 200, and last year we were a £14 million business. So a decent amount of backing and a decent sized business to be working with. Today's webinar, well, obviously it's presented by ourselves, Bytes SP, and also by F5. We've been working with F5 for a few years now, and frankly, they're one of the better vendors we work with. Enjoy working with F5 very much. This webinar is about hybrid cloud, as you all probably aware, which is why you signed up for it, and what F5 can do with that. But it's you know, it's about the concepts, the design, and how you go about achieving this, as well as what F5 can do to actually help you achieve it. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Nigel. I'll make you the presenter, Nigel. There we go, that's all yours, and I'll be quiet and cut into the background.
Okay, just give me 1 second on that. Right, you should be able to see my screens now. Thank you very much indeed, David, much appreciated. Thank you for handing over there. The theme of the session here is about hybrid cloud and hybrid cloud architecture and the components that go behind it. Always when talking to customers about it, you know, hybrid use at the same time. Use the actual your own data centers and actual external environments. Other things to look at here, and specifically, is it's not static. You know, when you go to cloud or go to a hybrid architecture, it's dynamic, and so we need to actually look and understand that in a little bit more detail. And the other side about this session, the webinar, is we're going to look at the architecture components of it, rather than actually going into the detail. Happy to go into detail, but probably not within the actual session here. Maybe Q&As afterwards and everything else, but more than happy to look at it. But it's architecture components here. So general things which people actually are looking at these days. Well, computing as an infrastructure, storage, networking, the whole principles of you know, where does infrastructure as a service fit into it, and how can actually streamline some of the environments that's there. But also at the same time, realistically, how can we actually make it more efficient and look at the actual costs of actually implementation and bring them down in line with some of the budgets that we have today. So, without ado, you know, we look at what's driving it. Well, quite often we're seeing that actually on the left-hand side here, you know, it's demand. if I look generally at a lot of the customers that are out there, times back it was just one device per person. Now we're talking 3 or 4 devices per person, and they want to have access to all the applications and services at any point in time. We've also seen a lot of virtualization in the data centers. Is it our own data center today, or is it somebody else's data center, or is it a hybrid and we're going to utilize both together? We're going to burst into some of it for a specific time period or reason, or a marketing exercise component there. And also, what we're seeing now is also a lot of innovation. New ways of actually deploying some of the application components, which we'd never seen or considered doing within our own data centers. So lots of things driving it there, and if you look at generally what some of the actual analysts talk about in terms of the component sets here, a lot of it is about where we're actually going to go in terms of deploying our apps. In terms of expectations, well, I think the statement here on 76%, probably pretty high, but there is a strong migrational viewpoint that we will actually look and see that some of these hybrid environments will become core to our businesses longer term. On the actual sort of second statement there's an interesting comment there. It's multi-cloud providers. Multi-cloud, I'll come back to this on one or two of the other slides a bit later on, but the concept and idea of having multiple services, not necessarily just from one cloud vendor, but lots of different cloud vendors. How do we actually integrate? How do we actually have that control of that? And that's sort of some of the things which we'll look at in some of the architecture components and how they can be addressed. So some of the things that you look at when looking at cloud deployments and cloud challenges, a lot of the time I'm looking at the ideas and components of where locations are in terms of hybrid technologies. It doesn't have to be within country, within certain geographical regions. Also, lots of things also come down to latency and the considerations of latency, of how we can do that. And a lot of that, again, is about if we're going to move to a hybrid or to a cloud type solution set, how do we actually ensure that we've actually got as good, if not better, user experience of those applications and those components than if we actually had them in our own data center component there. So those are quite a few of the things that we're seeing and well, designing with in terms of the architectures. I did mention that the applications need to fall under certain circumstances, and quite often the 3 here which I'm highlighting, which are really about data protection in that environment there, is the application also ready to actually go into a hybrid? Quite a lot of the applications we look at aren't ready to go. They need to be made ready into maybe into a virtualized environment set before they can actually be transferred over and on their existing infrastructures. Again, we'll look at that a little bit in terms of what are the slides, the components, and how you burst into some of these environments there. And something that always comes up is, well, the SLA. Well, actually, if you've got mission-critical applications, maybe hybrid and cloud isn't the actual to look at it. To get SLAs relative to the ones that you have in-house for mission-critical ones is still probably a bit of a challenge at this moment in time. So look at the actual criticality of each of the applications and see if it's actually suitable to be able to be moved into a hybrid or into a cloud environment set there. These would be my 3 major areas which I look at on a fairly regular basis. So where do we come from? Well, if we look at where we came from, fairly traditional architecture and component here. Linear delivery. This is what we've been designing probably for the last 10 to 15 years in terms of architectures. We have our users, we have some type of firewall security components in there. We then go into another device which probably will be an ADC these days for an application delivery controlling environment and redirecting to services, providing a very high availability, very high security, and also making the end user experience fast in that environment there. So that's our traditional architecture and the components that we have. However, over the last 3 to 4 years, that architecture has been changed, and it's been challenged quite dramatically. What I mean by the challenging is that the actual complexity of the way that we deliver it here. At F5, software as a service components and infrastructure components. My time and expenses, for example, is sitting in New York, but is actually provided as a software service component there. But it still has to be integrated into the existing systems that I have in my data centers. I still want to have control. I still want to have the same security. I still want to have the same policies that I would normally have if it was actually in my own data center, rather than sitting in a hybrid or somebody else's cloud environment as a service. The complexity also is that we have more endpoints. We've got those delivery models, but certainly we see more applications being deployed, lots more applications in terms of that, especially for the mobile and bring your own device component sets out there. So the complexity is really changing quite dramatically, and we need to be able to put a methods and ways that we can actually have our existing policies and control, but allow for the flexibility to bring on more and new applications quicker and faster in that environment set there. And that's sort of some of the areas that we'll look at. In terms of infrastructure and some of the silos, well, actually, as we do some of the actual changes and modifications to some of these environments, the actual migration actually works against our existing infrastructures quite a lot of the time. As I mentioned earlier, we don't actually take our delivery services, our control components in there. Our security, how do we take the security out into a hybrid environment? Maybe actually device management in terms of that environment there, and also sort of the connectivity components and the expectations for availability of connectivity on that. So all of these infrastructure components will impact how, again, we actually look at delivering a hybrid type of solution. Fundamentally, one of the things that hybrid environments allow us to do is to actually have a lot more agility, and allows us to integrate it quicker and faster in that environment set there. We'll look at again a bit later on in some of the slides that how this can be achieved and what are the components and building blocks for that environment set there. But fundamentally, if you look at this slide here, it's about consistency in terms of the components. And we need to get consistency before we do a hybrid or a cloud environment set delivery. So on the left-hand side, what I'm looking at here is where my locations are, where I'm located for the end users and the actual data centers and device components there, and any device types that I'm looking at. On the right-hand side, what I'm looking at is the data centers in terms of what applications I have in my data centers and the potential outsource components and hybrid component sets there. In the center box, I've really got my idea that I need a consistent delivery to the end users, and I also need a replicated policy to the actual data centers and to the application components there. I need to be able to replicate this time and time again, really quickly and really simply. I also need to have the ability to manage this and understand what's actually going on very quickly. And the core functionality comes down to some of the building blocks below there. I put acceleration in there, and acceleration I put down to the end user and the devices in there. You know, if you're moving an application into a hybrid environment, where does it move from to? If it's moving from a European data center into a US data center, then latency in the environment is hugely requirement to look at. If it's fairly more local, it may not be so much, but we still need to take into consideration how to make a device which is sitting normally, which has been on the LAN, into the WAN effectively, look and feel the same. How can we extend it in terms of extendability? I'll look again at this in a short while in terms of the reference architecture components, but how do I actually take it and say, I want some in my data center and some in my hybrid environment, and I will need to understand where the users are coming from and what they're doing. I need it to be also integrated. Integration in terms of the ability to actually understand easily and quickly how I move from a hybrid into my data center and back. A context of services. What services am I actually having internally today? What security policy have I set on that? And can I actually take that context and that service policy and put it back out into the cloud easily and simply? And then when I make modifications both on my internal policy, will that replicate out into my actual remote sites at the same time? We need reporting and to understand what's actually happening. We also need, well, I put it down here as a thing called IaaS, but it's the repeatability of it. How can you actually set it up and have it as a shopping book or a book of items that I want to go and put out, and then I can click on it, and within a couple of clicks I can actually then repeat that process 2 or 3 times for different application components. And finally, the fundamental one over here is also availability. How do I actually understand what the availability is when I've gone to a hybrid? Do I actually need to actually go to the hybrid and make sure that I monitor all the services and systems that are out there relative to my users? Do I want to be able to have the ability to pull the users back really quickly if we see that there's maybe a couple of issues there, and have effectively my data center take over some of those availability capabilities? So all of that sort of basically builds up into 2 major things here. One, I talk about it in terms of the data center agility, the ability to move basically the users to and from these hybrid environments to our own data centers and back. And also the other fundamental thing is the actual orchestration or automation that's required on this environment. If we don't have the automation from this, then it makes the deployment of these applications and redeployment of them really quite tricky, and actually costs us more than it really should do. Those are the fundamental ones from this slide. And what I'll do is I'll explore a couple of the management and the actual implementation ideas based on this. So, if you've got an application delivery service that you wish to put out, I've shown a number of data centers across the actual bottom here, but actually fundamentally, when we go to a data center, if it's a remote one, a hybrid one, or whatever, we need to be able to repeatedly be able to put that application there and pull it back. I keep talking about pulling back the application as well. Think of it in terms of the concepts of a mobile phone. We have a contract for a certain period of time, maybe 2 years with a certain provider, and then after that period of time we look around and we actually see what actually else is in the marketplace, who's providing maybe a slightly more value-added service on that, and how can we actually look at that in terms of the costs. Maybe it's beneficial for us to actually pull back and then redeploy to a different service, being able to cut costs fully on that environment. The other side of it is that in terms of the integrated, orchestrated, and expedited, and how quick we can do this, we need to be able to do this not just for one application, but for lots of applications that we're looking at in terms of the actual environment set here. So that's where I talk about this application delivery services being repeatable, integrated, orchestrated, and expedited as much as possible. So how do we look at it there 5 in terms of that environment? Well, we actually utilize reference architecture component sets here, and this is actually a reference architecture for a cloud migration architecture. I'll just run you through some of the environment sets here, but really fundamentally on the actual right-hand side, it's about the admin. The admin's having this ability to be able to turn around and say, I want to take an application, one of the business line applications, and I want to move it out into another data center. So the top boxes are on-premise, the bottom box here is a cloud or a hybrid service environment there. First things first, the ability to actually have the application to be able to move it in both in either real time or move an image over there and happily be able to run it. But then on the other side of it is, once we've done that and we understand that the application's there, then we actually look at the application services. So that's sort of the center block in terms of the component there. How is that application services? So it may be the security policy, it may be the actual access policy in terms of that environment set there, it may be the actual user experience policy or acceleration components that are built into it. All of these components, and the availability side of it as well, need to be then replicated out into the actual hybrid. So I've shown that as the bottom box just in front of the line of business components. So once you've actually got to that stage of that environment there, and you could do that commonly through a cloud management component there with an interface onto it, then we need to actually look at the end user. How do we take an end user and move it from our existing on-premise infrastructure and then move them over to the actual the new actual hybrid environment set there? We can do it very quickly like a train line. We can move everybody over. There's some risks involved with that, but how do we test on that environment as well? Maybe we want to use a percentage of users. Maybe we want to put specifically the UK environment over to the new data center, but actually leave everybody from a European perspective still on the existing data center. Maybe we want to actually also then look at it in terms of the number of users that are there. So I have the capacity built out of my existing data center for maybe 1,000 users, but my hybrid environment allows me to burst to an extra 500 users in that environment there. So I want to use as much as I can locally, but then I want any overflow putting into the actual the hybrid environment set there. So DNS, as I showed in the top section there, is commonly utilized as a tool set, and it has to be integrated and it has to be orchestrated to the components. So all of these three major areas, the cloud management component, the actual application or application delivery services components and policies, and also where the user goes to actually get his data or information, they all need to be integrated into that environment to make life easier, simpler, and allow us to actually migrate smoothly on that environment. We'll have a look at some more of the architectures in a short while. Fundamentally, the actual environment for actually migration is based on automation. If we can make the automation quickly and fast and really efficient, then actually the business actually gains from it, and it gains quite dramatically in terms of normally the time to actually do it, in terms of the number of people we need to actually set up. It also works very much in our cost savings environment set there, and also the improved SLA deliveries to it. When I talk about sort of SLA there, actually I rather prefer to actually talk in terms of the actual user experience for the delivery of it, rather than just purely the SLA environments that are commonly put up there. It allows us really to react quickly to changing circumstances for the user experience. If the user experience starts to get poor, I need to put other services in line, do some migration components on it, and I can actually bring them back into SLA and give them a better user experience environment. So we come back to some architecture components here. The other sort of area of, well, there's one area which is just a pure migration of it, but the other area also is the actual bursting for short periods of time. Commonly, this is really time dependent, and it will be maybe for a percentage of users, it might be for a percentage in or out, the time to actually get the actual users out there. Maybe on a marketing campaign, it may be on a large burst in terms of timing. So commonly in accounts, you maybe want to prepare some burst out capabilities for accounting from April the 5th onwards type environment sets there, or end of year type environments, or specific seasonal events that actually happen in that environment. But the whole thing here is that it's actually normally a very quick to react type environment, and they actually have to put it on demand really quickly. It's not a planned one. It's a case of you need to do it now. Okay, I need to automate it. I need to make it really quick for the delivery component sets here. To do that, the main section here is actually to be able to manage it and actually orchestrate it in those components. And what I'll do now is actually just run through some of the actual ideas in terms of the actual management side of it, and how that can be integrated and how that can be worked together. So, if you look at different approaches to the cloud, there are really sort of two main audiences here. The enterprise that wants to actually go into the cloud, and actually there's cloud service providers that will offering a service or want you to actually come into their cloud environment sets there. And there are three ways to consume that environment set. Our traditional private cloud, our own data centers, and the way that we actually design it, or between a disaster recovery environment sets in there, in the private one, or into a hybrid one where we're looking at interoperability with the other people's clouds, where sometimes in our data center for a period of time or for a reason, but then maybe pulled back. And then also the public clouds where it's actually gone out into a general environment and it is out there for general consumption environments. So fundamentally, the cloud promises a lot of things. It promises a lot of things to the business, in terms of the economics and everything else, and the efficiency and the dynamic and the ability to actually adapt really quickly to the actual existing components out there. It also, IT promises to deliver some of these benefits to the business utilizing other infrastructures which is not in-house, and it provides the ability, elasticity and scalability that will be introduced. Is it easy to do it? Most of the time when we've been looking actually into the customer's deployment environments, it's actually quite hard to actually do it, and you have to go through this staged environment set there to make sure that, one, the application is the right application to be actually put out into the cloud. Two, is it actually able to actually be and ready to actually go there? And how do you actually wish the deployment in what terms of speed and the time to actually uptake and move users over? So looking at some of those more complexity environments, how can you make it a little bit quicker and easier? So this is a traditional provisioning and deployment timeline. This is the one which we have generally in our data centers today. We look at provisioning. Well, provisioning of VMs pretty quick. You go to the VM guy and he'll provision it fairly quickly in that environment. If you actually then request an infrastructure service, a back-end and forth, and definition and clarifications of all those components, actually quite a long time in generalization there. If you look at put it into the ITQ in terms of the environment there, when it can be scheduled to actually be added, changed, and modified, and does it meet all the process components then normally that's also quite a fair time. In terms of the actual other sections of it then, let's see if I can just quickly, actually, that's better, so I can see all the slides at my end as well. So the infrastructure services and configured, well actually not too long in terms of actually putting the infrastructure together and actually getting it configured. So is there a way that we can actually look at those two major blocks which sit in the center there and actually be able to make life a little bit easier? So those are the actual areas which we want to look at. Can we actually make those two sections in the center quicker and make them so that we actually have the provisioning of the VM and to the actual infrastructure services and configure as quick as possible, and not have to go through all of this back-end and ITQ environment sets? Well, actually, if you can predefine a catalog of infrastructure services, you have them predefined as templates and component sets there, and once you actually click on them, effectively you can do the provisioning. You can do the provisioning from the VM. It's still not going to change. It still takes a small amount of time to actually get it set out and sorted, but it's normally pretty fast. Select the correct infrastructure and the policy from your catalog. So you're actually having the policy that you've got and the actual hybrid environment that you require. And then actually after that, look at auto-configuration of the infrastructure and the services. So how do you orchestrate both the back end, once the VM is created? How do you orchestrate the actual policy of security, the actual ability of the availability and acceleration components based on that policy from that catalog? Select it, and then get it to auto-configure, and then start taking the users based on that policy again to the actual hybrid environment. So, what's the component which allows you to actually do some of these environments? Well, actually, it's going to be a management component in there. And that management component really needs to have 4 major modular components. It needs to have a self-service portal component. So the tenants and the providers can basically go in and have that catalog component. It needs cloud connectors in terms of connecting out into the actual the existing cloud providers. It needs workload auto-scaling to the cloud, the ability to actually understand how to actually take the users there, and also a lifetime management component set. So let's have a quick look at those in a bit more detail. See if it'll build up. Yeah, there we go. So cloud management, it really needs APIs in terms of integration. So traditional into VMware's environment and orchestration components and OpenStack and a number of other manufacturers out there that are providing the cloud management component sets there. So it needs to be able to do that. And commonly this is done through a REST API component there. And there should be templates for that to be able to make life easier and simpler. You don't want to actually go out and want to program a whole load of VMware's or OpenStack environments. Those should be provided as general components. They'll need to be customized, likely, but then they should be available. They should also be the multi-cloud control, the ability to actually have the multi-cloud support and understand how different clouds work in different ways and what their capacity is and capability is. If I take this application to this cloud provider here, will he be able to provide me with the actual security policy that I have in-house? If not, what can I do to actually go and provide that security component? Orchestrate it. Again, I talked about security there, but also the availability. Being able to turn around and say, okay, I'm into the actual hybrid component here. I've got my services and servers in VMs there. I actually need high availability across this actual infrastructure. How do I provide that? How do I actually provide the ability to actually have the advanced data control that I had in my own data center in the actual hybrid environment? And this is about orchestrating all those services components in there. You should be able to pop and click your existing management components and basically drop them into the actual hybrid environment and ask them to go and create and orchestrate those services for you. The network interoperability. Support for the traditional and also for the next generation architectures. So, the VMwares, the NSX, the Cisco's environments, the ACI architectures which are coming out at this moment in time. How do you actually make those actually interoperate as we look to a completely software-defined data centers components? So, taking not just the application, the control of the application, the single point of controls there, but also the network components at the same time, and provide that as a ability to actually follow our applications. So let's give you sort of a bit of an example of that environment there. Oops, no, it's the next slide on that one. This kind of repeats what I actually just been going through. It talks about the third-party orchestrations at the top, the REST APIs to link into it, and the actual REST APIs down to the actual data centers and what we've actually taken on board, but also eastbound connectors needing to go to the public providers' environments. So here's sort of an example of it. Here's the centralized management. In the bottom here I have my traditional data center. In the center I have my hybrid environment, and I then have a public cloud environment. And I'm running various other applications sitting on here. First of all, from the end user perspective, I wish to actually be able to go to a central point, and that central point may be at my data center, and I'd be able to actually gain access to all of these applications. So I still have the control, the authentication, and everything that's there, but I may then tokenize or Kerberos or SAML out to the actual other hybrid or the actual cloud environments, but I still have the control components based on it. But then actually, once I've got that control, I want to then look at other services that I want to put out there for these applications. So I'm showing on the top right-hand side here a number of different applications or what I would call application services that I wish to actually have as policies. And on the left-hand side, these are my new applications that I wish to actually load and run into my, my data center environment sets here. So I might have an existing application in my data center. What I want to do is just basically turn around and actually make it so that it's available to utilize in a mobile environment. So maybe I wish to put LTE or 4G optimization into that environment set there. I might want to take a new application. When that new application is deployed, I want to put it into my existing data center at the moment. I want to see how it runs and works and everything else. I want to set some policies up for it. And I take that application and I'm going to put it into the data center, and I need to scale appropriately for that application and actually add the policies for that app that would be suitable within my own environment set there. Sort of the next area is that I have applications that are actually hybrid environments in their environment, and I wish to move them into a cloud environment, but at the same time I then wish to actually take a service and actually deploy that service onto that actual application. And in that environment there I showed an application which was already in a hybrid cloud. I'm moving it to a true cloud environment, but now I've moved it over, I require distributed denial of service capabilities built into that, and that should follow my application wherever it is. So the centralized management component allows me to be able to have this ability to move applications to my data centers, to my hybrid, and to the cloud, put new ones in, but actually add the services on it, and that's the beauty of the actual centralized component set that is required, really. So, looking a little bit into actually the business side of it, why should we do this? Why's a good reason to actually architect in some of these ways? Well, it must be based on actually the benefits the business can take on from it. When you look at how we design data centers today, we design commonly data centers which are utilized to take an application. We over-engineer them because we need to look at it between 2, 3, 4 years in terms of an accounting aspect of that environment set there. And also when we actually put it in, we over-design some of the architectures to be able to have a huge amount of overhead just in case in terms of that environment and things change. So we actually have a lot of hardware sitting there not doing as efficiently as we could actually like it to have. Would it be nice to be able to design data centers to the average demand and then actually look at the way that the actual peak demand is in terms of adding an N+1 data center or N+1 service to that actually environment set there, and being able to burst out into that component or migrate for a period of time environment. And the other one at the bottom there is more of the actual pay-as-you-go, which is more of the bursting component sets there. But being able to make sure that if we are going to do this, we're going to design data centers which are smaller, more suited to actual our own capacity in-house for our mission-critical ones, and then we wish to actually build them out into other data centers, that we actually consume the resources when it's needed, and we maintain a consistency across the actual devices, both for security and for the actual availability and for the actual end user experience component sets there. So it's great to do it, but we just need to make sure that we're doing it in an intelligent way for the end user. What it really comes down to at the end of the day is actually looking at how fast we can actually move these actual users in and out and actually offer these services. Please keep remembering that services that we put out there aren't going to stay out there forever. They will actually have to come back in for periods of time and then probably go back out to another service provider, or there is a migration requirement from one hybrid to another hybrid in some point of time. We need to make sure that all of these environments are scalable. Sizing is really, really important in terms of this environment there, but scalable not just internally, but actually externally. And the last item there is what I call consistency. Being able to consistently enforce the business's policies for both security, both for availability, and for the actual user experience into the actual hybrid environment and maintaining what we would normally design in-house. So with that sort of point in mind, there is a reference architectures and everything that I've been speaking about is actually based on this link. Please feel free to actually click onto it and actually go and actually have a look at the reference architectures. They have a lot more detail rather than just what I'm talking about in terms of the reasons why. They show how these architectures can be implemented and what we've actually done in the past. And there's quite often some use cases and reference components built into that at the same time. With that in mind, thank you very much indeed. I'm going to ask to hand back to David and to Shanna in the background here, and say thank you very much indeed for listening to this part of the actual webinar.
Thank you very much, Nigel. Guys, really the first question here is, have you got any questions? Is there anything everyone wants to ask? Nobody's asked anything yet, but that doesn't mean that there aren't any. So we've got one pop-up initially, Nigel, which is what, in your opinion, what do you see as the cloud management component here?
Actually, the cloud management component is really kind of split into the terms of that environment set there. There is what I would call the traditional cloud management components. So we have go to the orchestration environment sets there. So you'll look at things like VMware's orchestration or HP OpenView or the Microsoft management suites. So that'll be a choice of an end user's environment, what they're building out with those component sets there, which is more than just the orchestration for hybrid environment sets there. I think what's more importantly is how that orchestration component actually links into delivery controllers and how we deliver the applications across it. So from our perspective, it would be the big IQ technologies which we develop, but we're developing it not for pure orchestration. We're developing it to actually link into the orchestration managers, as is mentioned, like HP, VMware, and those environment sets there. So I think both of them have to be there together to work on it. One's a flow management, and one's the actual implementation and managing the actual data and user flow components. So the two need to be together.
Okay.
Hopefully that answers the question.
I don't know if you can see that one there about data sovereignty. Can you see that one on the question pop out, Nigel?
Give me a second to see if I can see it on my board.
Basically, the question is, data sovereignty is, from what this person understands, a big preventer of cloud adoption. Is this your understanding, and how real is this as a preventer?
Sorry, the cloud, just go past the first section of that question again, sorry.
Data sovereignty is, from what I believe, a big preventer of cloud adoption. Is this your understanding, and how real a world is this a preventer? So I guess here we're talking about, if I put my data in the cloud, I don't know where it is, I don't know which country it's in, how do I control
Absolutely.
that, and how big of an issue is that in the real world?
It's a huge issue. It's not so much an issue when you're talking to North America and those environment sets there, but when we come into Europe, it becomes a huge issue. So when I'm working with, for example, some of the Dutch governmental environment sets there, it cannot go outside the boundaries of their country. It's very simple, okay, regardless of the environment. And also, a lot of the actual data sovereignty in that environment set there has to be within commonly, contractually, companies that are certified by the government's environment sets there. So, again, I'll go to the Dutch environment. If you're not registered and certified by the actual Dutch authorities there, then there's a high probability that they won't actually put it into the cloud at all. If you are certified, then yes, the adoption is actually very quick and very fast indeed. So yes, we're starting to see more data centers appear with hybrid options there within countries, which is sort of like the second generation of it. The first generation was the ones which were generally available for everybody. Now it's actually more country orientated, and within data centers within specific countries with contracts that are governmental governmentally linked. So initially, yes, it was actually a restrictor to adoption. Now we're seeing it actually, people have got on board, got the data centers locally, and we're starting to see it actually move much faster.
Okay, no, cool. Another question we've had pop up. I don't know if you talked about VMware and a couple of others, but what orchestration managers do you commonly integrate with?
Yeah, okay. The ones which we commonly demonstrate are HP orchestration, and we actually do VMware orchestration and Microsoft. Those are the three that we actually work with in terms of the actual management and flow environment sets there. Why? Because we have templates for that have been built up over a period of time, and it's easy to show those components. But that doesn't really mean that those are the only ones that we actually do. We actually work with quite a few other ones, smaller niche ones, and as long as they've got a REST API capability, then we can link into that, and we can actually build the flows up from that. So I would say the three major ones there, HP, VM, and Microsoft environment sets there.
Okie doke. And the last question we've had is around sort of a bit more technology based. Can you explain in more detail where DNS fits into the architecture as a whole?
Yes. A lot of the actual environments that we're looking at in terms of hybrid environment sets there, we look at the back-end components of it. So we move the actual servers and the actual data actually gets moved over. and then we actually move the policies which actually fit in front of those actual servers. But then how do we really manage the end user in terms of where he goes and how he gets there? The last thing you want to do is actually send a user to a data center that actually can't provide that service. So DNS, or global server load balancing as it's sometimes called, is actually a great way of understanding which applications are actually running, what the health of those applications are, and once we know the health of those applications, we can then send them to those users to that actual environment. A great example of that is I have one app customer that has applications that they've migrated within the UK, but they still actually don't want to keep the ones for Europe migrated. They just want to keep them in the existing data center. Again, it's about the actual data security of their environment there. So they actually have a policy which very simply says, if anybody comes from the UK, I want them to go to this data center in the hybrid cloud. If anybody comes from another European country, then I want them to go to my existing data center, which is in-house in the environment set there. So DNS can be used as an availability tool set, but also at the same time it can be utilized as a migrational tool of taking people into a hybrid. What I also talk about more often is the ability to move them back out of the actual hybrid cloud and back into our existing data center if I then wish to change my contract or change my service level agreement into a different cloud component. Hopefully that sort of gives you an example of how DNS can be utilized in those types of solutions.
Yep, no, I think so. That's good. Okay, well, we haven't had any other questions, so I think we'll wrap up here. Thank you very much, Nigel. Thank you very much for your time. Guys, thank you very much for listening. And the recording of this will be online shortly. And if you've got any questions, as always, come back to your account manager and we'll work through it for you. So, guys, thank you very much. And we'll leave you in peace to get on with your day. Thank you.